everybody, I'm Sarah Gallegos, and we are here on the set of the 3600 series of Love of Quilting, and Faux has sent Carmen Geddes to teach us some fun things, yes. So we've always got more to share than we can get through in our episodes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many things, so little time.
And there's just so much in your sewing brain, you know?
Oh, what's left of it.
So one of the things that I think is so special about you, and by the way, you're from 10 Sisters Handicraft, is your business too, and lots of really cool patterns and techniques. And one of the things that I love about this is that you will take really traditional stitching methods and find a quicker, easier way to use it, right?
Yes, exactly. I think that's going to be on my headstone. If it looked hard, but it was really easy, then that's Carmen.
That's right. So what have you got for us today?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, with Applique, we could just talk all day about Applique. And I have done probably every kind of applique technique I can think of on this performance icon. And I've sewn on denim and lightweight cottons and all sorts of things. And there's just so many fun techniques. And so this is an applique technique that I love because it's really great results and it's easy.
It's easy.
And so every kind of applique that you do, you need to create a shape.
Right.
And I love practicing with a heart. I always have my students practice with a heart because in applique, we have different shapes that we're trying to create. And we have hills, and we have valleys, and we have points. No matter if you're doing an outdoor scene or a sunbonnet Sue, you have hills, valleys, and points. And so this is a great way to practice. This technique, we're going to use fusible applique.
Okay.
Fusible applique. We're
It's
going
like a
to
stabilizer.
use, yes, we're going to use iron-on interfacing.
To create a fusible
to create
applique.
a fusible
That's
applique.
right.
See, you're interpreting me so well. And so when we are doing that, you're going to trace your shape. So I trace the heart with a water-soluble pen. I've just kind of easy cut around that because it's really hard to just cut this out on the line, and we don't want to. We're going to put rough to right. When you're creating an applique with iron-on interfacing, then you're always going to put that fusible.
So that may feel kind of strange, right? We're putting the gluey stuff to the right side, but we're not pressing it yet.
Exactly. So. Keep that iron away from this right now. And so then we are going to just sew on the drawn line all the way around the whole thing. And I did a pretty tight stitch length on this. I mean, I probably used a 1.5 stitch length because I want it tight. We're going to, you can do this before or after you cut it out, but you're going to just cut a little slit. Now don't cut your fabric. We're just going to cut a little slit. I usually cut like a little X just in that interfacing. Notice that we have a real small little seam allowance too. So you will cut a small seam allowance. You're going to turn this inside out. And what this does is kind of magic because it actually is turning your seam allowances over the edge. So this is like needle turn in that way.
Faux needle turn, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, but your edges are turned. And so which gives you a great look. And then we are going now, this becomes a fusible applique.
Nice.
So I'm going to let you fuse that to our background.
Excellent.
Because the other thing that comes up is how do we sew this down?
Right.
And so we were playing with some decorative stitches and that blanket stitch with applique, but I want to show you a stitch that gives you a look of hand, like you've hand stitched this down. And that involves the invisible thread. So I've threaded. Now the other thing that I did with this invisible thread is I put that little net over the spool. And what that does is that invisible thread likes to kind of flit around and do its thing. The other thing that I'm using is this extended
thread stand.
Thread
guide.
And I love that because that thread's just going to feed up. Really, that's one of the secret to sewing with invisible thread is you just have to let it know that you are the boss of it.
I agree with that.
That is the deal. And once it knows that you are the boss, then it's wonderful. Thank you. So now that's all fused down. So I've got the invisible thread, and I want to show a kind of a fun way to, we're going to do a small zigzag on this, and it kind of gives you that look of hand stitching it. But what happens to me is I get my stitch that I like, and then a month later I come back to do some more applique, and And it's like, darn, what was that stitch that I used?
Because you can modify, so then you've got to get back to how you adjusted that stitch.
So we're going to create the stitch that I want on this, and then we're going to save it so that I can just bring it up next time I sew. So for this particular one, I'm using stitch number 5, which is that center position zigzag. And then I'm going to adjust the width of that stitch. And I like to have it be at about a 1.8. Let's touch that, get that in the middle.
So what Carmen has adjusted here is she's adjusted the width to make it really, really narrow. And then you've also adjusted on the machine the positioning of that stitch within the 9mm stitch opening. And you've got it right in the center,
yes, because what I want is a narrow, and then I'm going to touch this little heart down here to save my stitches, and I already have it in here saved.
So you can,
as my applique zigzag.
Give it a name and save it for later.
And you're going to save it for later, and then when I want to sew it, then I'm going to come over to this cute little cloud that's over here. These are my sew net stitches, and these are all the things that have been saved, and there is my applique zigzag right there.
Nice.
I don't have to remember what I did before. Now, I've got this big open toe foot on here, and I love this because this foot has got this nice little red guide just right in the center. That is what I'm going to put on the edge of the applique. Now,
it shows you exactly where the center needle position is.
Yes, and that's going to be exactly where the edge of my applique is going to be. Now, this is a pretty small stitch. When I first start stitching this out, I want to pretend that I'm hand sewing, and I go pretty slow. And then I'm going to sink that needle in. I love that presser foot lift, and it just lets me go right around that corner.
That looks beautiful.
Now, you can lengthen this stitch length a little bit. If you say, oh, that's just way too narrow of a stitch, Carmen, and you want to make that a little bit wider, then you can totally do that. And then I just love the look.
So you can barely see it.
Yes, and don't you think it gives that look of a little hand stitch?
It sure does.
So, yeah, so fun.
Great technique. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Now go applique.
That's right.